What's the most you ever lost on a coin toss?
Sir?
The most you ever lost on a coin toss?
I don't know. I couldn't say.
Call it.
Call it.
Yes.
For what?
Just call it.
Well, we need to know what we're calling it for here.
You need to call it. I can't call it for you. It wouldn't be fair.
I didn't put nothing up.
Yes, you did. You've been putting it up your whole life. You just didn't know it. You know what date is on this coin?
No.
1958. It's been traveling 22 years to get here. And now it's here. And it's either heads or tails. And you have to say, call it.
Well, look, I need to know what I stand to win.
Everything.
How's that?
You stand to win everything, call it.
All right. Heads then.
Well done. Don't put it in your pocket.
Sir?
Don't put it in your pocket. It's your lucky water.
Where do you want me to put it?
Anywhere not in your pocket. Or it'll get mixed in with the others and become just a coin. Which it is.
You are tuned in to God's Property Radio. Here are your hosts, Sam and Dan.
I go by Sam, and welcome back to God's Property Radio. This is Coin Toss, episode number 21. I'm going to be really short here because it's kind of a long episode. We usually try to keep coin tosses shorter if we can, but this was an interview with Johnny Cirucci, who has a book out called Illuminati Unmasked. When Johnny found out through listening to our coin tosses about Peter Riley and the Jesuit connection, et cetera, he got really pumped up because his book deals a lot with the Jesuits, and we hadn't really, so far in the history of God's Property Radio's broadcasts haven't really talked about the Jesuits. So it was a good conversation, and I hope you enjoy it, and I will see you in the outro.
Here we go.
Well, the interesting thing is that the good Lord has a sense of humor. Oh my goodness, does the Lord have a sense of humor? I was born and raised Catholic in an Italian family in the South Jersey, Philadelphia area, where there's a great many Italian Catholics. And, boy, how much detail to give you. An interesting home life. The parents stayed together most of the time. Had a kind of like an abusive father. He had two sides, kind of a Jekyll and Hyde kind of thing. Sometimes he was a great guy. Sometimes he was an absolute beast. And so this caused problems with me. It may have affected my development. I seem to have been kind of a late bloomer. I was an intelligent kid, a very creative kid, but not very disciplined. And so I had very ambitious dreams and never had really the discipline and responsibility to do the hard work necessarily to follow them through. And as a kid, those dreams had to do with the military, the Marine Corps, and just doing great and wonderful things, just being, I started off, wanted to go to the Naval Academy and be a fighter pilot, and just anything elite that you could think of on those lines. And as I said, I had the aptitude, but I didn't have the stick-to-itiveness. I think it's pretty interesting to note that as I tried to get into the Naval Academy, I had no problem convincing congressmen to get their appointments because I was sharp and had a good public face, but I didn't have the grades. I had very average grades in high school. So I didn't make it into the Naval Academy and ended up going to the University of New Mexico. And that was an interesting experience. I did that for a couple of semesters and still had problems while I was away. There were issues back at home. My father never really... Well, he played around a lot. He never wore his wedding ring, and then I guess he came home and would take it out on me and So that added some interesting dynamics for me, and I really tried hard to get as far away from the family and home as possible. So I went to the University of New Mexico all the way across the country, and I still felt burdened. I still would come home and have problems with the family. And so I decided to just drop out of everything and enlist in the Marine Corps. And all that did was force me to face how irresponsible I was. I had gone through half of Marine Corps boot camp and just decided I was trapped. I didn't want to do it anymore. I want to be a little kid again. And so I claimed that I was suicidal and mentally unfit. And so that was in late 80s. That was late 80s. Marine Corps boot camp at San Diego, MCRD San Diego. So I took an entry-level separation discharge, failure to train, went back home. The parents had divorced because the old man was cheating on my mom like crazy. Never wore his wedding ring. I think I already said that. So miserable home life at that point. Total failure. Failed at college, failed at the military, and had issues at home. Was really going nowhere fast, and decided to, let me finish what I started. I pull myself up by my bootstraps and go back. And I went to speak to, actually I was pulling down a blue-collar job for a while, and I was looking around and go, oh my goodness, I'm going to be installing TV cable for the rest of my life unless I do something. So I wanted to go back to college, finish what I had started. I want to go back to the University of New Mexico. I started paperwork on getting tuition there. And I went and I saw a Marine Corps recruiter, and I told him my story. I said, listen, man, I made a mistake. I want to go back. He said, it's not a problem, brother. It happens all the time. We'll get the waivers for you, and we'll make it happen. So I was kind of shocked at how easy it was. I stepped back. So wait, let me finish my college paperwork, see what I can get. By the grace of the good Lord, and at that time I was a non-practicing Catholic. I got tuition reimbursement. I got grants and loans and stuff to go back to the University of New Mexico out in Albuquerque. So I went out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and was really excited to be finishing what I started. And so I went to talk to a Marine recruiter out there, and he said, I don't know what that other guy told you. You're out of luck, buddy. You're unfit, and we're not taking you back. So I was shocked. I said, wait a minute, why is one guy saying yes and another guy saying no? So I started a long trail of paperwork, congressional investigations, New Jersey, New Mexico, congressmen, senators, all said the same thing. You're unfit, you're not coming back. So I was out in New Mexico, and I was at the cafeteria, sitting on the grass outside the cafeteria, and this guy walks up to me. He's got a Marine Corps duffel bag, and he sits down and starts talking to me. And I'm thinking, what is this guy, weird? Is he gay? He walked right up to me out of the clear blue sky, started talking. Well, it turns out we have everything in common. We're lean to the right on politics. We like motorcycles and guns. The guy had just come back from a 5-year tour in the Marine Corps. He's a Marine security guard, been all over the world. And so we built a fast friendship. Turns out the guy was, his mom worked in the hospital where I was born in Denville, New Jersey. The guy was from New Jersey. And here we are in Albuquerque, New Mexico, right? So we became friends, did so much together. We both started writing conservative columns for the university newspaper. One day, the guy came in, and he just, off the wall, he said, dude, if you want to be a real patriot, a real conservative, you ought to be a born-again Christian, or at least a practicing Christian, because that's what so many of the founding fathers were. I was like, what? Where did that come from? So he's just planting seeds, and another time he came in, and I'm a passionate guy. I've always had a kind of like a construction worker's vocabulary, and but that back in the day when I wasn't saved, when I was a non-practicing Catholic, I was bad across the board, to take the Lord's name in vain, and so he hit me again at another occasion and said, man, you got to think of what you're saying. I'm like, hey, look, dude, stop trying to convert me here. So the third time we've worked, I was complaining about being alone, not having a girlfriend. He said, listen, man, if you want to get a good quality girl, you need to come to my church. It's the pastor's a young guy. He's cool. He rides a Harley. And I think he had a brochure or something, and he showed it to me. Maybe I looked it up. Said the guy's name was Skip. This tall, I was like 6'3", 6'4", blonde dude, and he was from California. I said, dude, I am not going to your church to listen to some tall, blonde surfer dude talk to me about heaven and hell. But it worked. I was hard up for getting a date, and so I told him, I said, listen, I'm going to go for one time. I'm going to listen to this guy. I'm going to look around, shake some hands, and then I'm leaving. So I went in. The name of the pastor is Skip Heitzig, and it's Calvary Chapel in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So I walked in, and it was like nothing I'd ever experienced in Catholic Mass, Catholic Church before.
Of course.
There were, the seats were comfortable. People are grabbing my hand, giving me hugs. I'm like, get off of me. They had a bookstore, a coffee shop. It was just radically different. And I'd always wanted to know what the Bible said as I was growing up. We had, we're a very patriotic family. We're all about truth and righteousness, doing the right thing. But I could just never really sit down and read it and understand it. It was boring. There was stuff about numbers I didn't understand, genealogies I didn't care. It never was able to sink in. So I sat down, and this guy, this pastor, first of all, it was worship was like modern, and it was great. It sounded great, and I was kind of getting into it, which is unusual for me and my church experience. And then this guy is dressed in kind of like business casual, came out. There was nothing else on the stage, just a bar stool, and he came out with a little thin brown Bible, and he just started to explain it and teach the Bible. And my eyes were opened. It was like I was home. I never did an altar call. I was home, and I just kept going back, and there was no lightning. There was no radical change then and there, but it did radically change me. And sometime after that, I'd been working hard on this waiver. After 7 years of trying, Sam, I got a waiver to go back to the Marine Corps and to go back in Marine Corps boot camp. I was 27 years old, and this time I went to Marine Corps boot camp at Parris Island. And I like to tell people I'm the only guy stupid enough to have done both Marine Corps boot camps, and this time I graduated. So clearly the Lord had changed my life for the better. Yeah. And I had spent, that was January 16th, 1994, by the way, and I've been very, very passionate about my relationship with Jesus Christ ever since. I've radically changed. But just almost just as important is the kind of awakening that I had about what's really going on in the world. I was still very, very, very patriotic, very right of center, but into the mainstream media stuff, the Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, and Sean Hannity and all that. And it wasn't until the advent of Barack Obama that I started to get angry and upset. Now, I did 4 years in the Marine Corps Reserve, and then I went into the active duty Army, and then Barack Obama came around, and I had done a deployment to Iraq, and I realized that something was not right. Something was not right about the war. Something was definitely not right about Obama. And more critically, something was not right about how all these conservative talking heads were pulling their punches. This guy had a very creepy background. We didn't even know who he was. There's aspects to this, his candidacy and now his presidency, in regards to him being a natural-born citizen, that I thought were pretty worthwhile to talk about, and yet none of the mainstream talking heads were hitting this up. And I'm thinking, why are you pulling your punches on this guy? Well, for me, what put it over the edge for me was the supposed killing of Osama bin Laden. I knew outright. I actually had contacts. I knew of people in the Special Forces community that they knew that it was was not accurate. That if it happened at all, they sent that SEAL Team 6 in and killed the body double, and then dumped him in. You have the most critical intelligence asset. Where they waterboarded Khalid Sheikh Mohammed like 120 times or something ridiculous just to get every scrap of information out of him. But Osama bin Laden, the most critical intelligence asset of the entire war on terror, you shoot him on sight and dump him in the ocean. And everybody in conservative media bought this and carried the water. So that was my awakening, and ever since then I've been questioning things left and right, and more right than left, honestly. I started blogging in 2004 because I was expressing myself and being frustrated and angry with what I couldn't fix, and that kind of led into more serious blogging. I experimented with podcasting, and then finally I was getting frustrated with how little coverage I could get with blogging, and I put a lot of my thoughts together in the book that I wrote, Illuminati Unmasked. So, but that was after a final awakening that I had. I was really heavy into it, still kind of am, into podcasting and listening to people, trying to get ahead of alternative news so I can get real news. And I heard a guy by the name of Eric John Phelps on a program, and he shocked me. He absolutely amazed me. He gave names, places, and dates of things throughout history that proved to me that both the Vatican and the Jesuit order were behind the New World Order. And so I had my final shocking, no, you know what? I take that back. Not my final awakening, but another jolt. I had another jolt, and it was from that jolt that kind of urged me to put all my writing together into a book.
Wow. That's pretty awesome. It's what you said about, Osama bin Laden. I mean, it is almost once you accept that kind of paradigm of, where we are at, where, things are intentional, not accidental. It's so hard to take any of those official stories at all seriously, because we aren't showed any sort of proof for anything that's reported. I mean, even the word reported is like, you can write a book report. That doesn't mean it's factual. You can report on thing. And we accept all reports on news stations, which are, entertainment at large, as fact. And yeah, man, that was a big one too. It's when you put it that way, it's like you have to rethink it. Like I mean, nobody wants to,
I'm at the point now, Sam. I'm so cynical that I tell people, if it's on television, it's a lie. If it's on the CIA news network, if it's on faux news, it's propaganda. It's a lie. It's meant to distract you. It's bread and circuses. It's not there unless it has a point to propagandize. I become really cynical as I look into these major events that have happened, from 9/11 to the Boston Marathon bombing to Sandy Hook. They're all manipulated in some way. Either they were fabricated by traitors in our own country who were led by Rome and the Pope, or they were fabricated completely. I personally believe that not a single child died at Sandy Hook. So one or the other. All of these terrible, terrible events, the Charlie Hebdo in Paris, the Ottawa shooting, Sydney, Australia, they're coming now at a pace. Now the Charleston, now after we had the Walter Scott, I believe was a hoax. Now we have another Charleston, another South Carolina shooting. I haven't looked too much into it, but it clearly seems to be another fabricated event. Whether people actually died or not, I don't have evidence. But clearly the event itself is being stirred up and purposely exploited because the Luciferians who run the world, and I mean Luciferians, I mean these are people who serve Lucifer, who run the world, are pushing, because stuff like what we're doing right now is gaining traction, and they don't have the ability to slow it down. So information, they have to beat out information, and they already control everything, Sam. They control Google, they control Facebook, they control YouTube, they control all the major media, and yet it's still not enough. The information is still getting out, and so they are racing us to the finish line with these constant false flags and created tragedies and events to create total chaos. The racial divide is just one more tool for them to create this chaos. So everything I see on the news now, I can't even watch it anymore. I can't even turn the TV anymore.
Well, not to mention just, when the celebrity news too, like just stupid stuff where it's like everybody's posting about Bruce Jenner, it's like, come on, like.
Well, yeah, and even that too, bread and circuses, even that too. Did you know that Bruce Jenner went to high school in Newtown, Connecticut?
Really?
Oh, yeah. Bruce Jenner went to high school in Newtown, Connecticut, and he was given was it a Porsche? He was given a special Porsche after he won the decathlon. His little brother took the Porsche out for a spin and crashed and died. So and now he's connected to the Kardashians. I believe that there is something going on behind the scenes. Bruce Jenner, the decathlon winner, was the embodiment of American masculinity. I believe that he was targeted somehow by the Luciferians, and that his gender reassignment is just one more way for them to attack and humiliate us.
Right. Well, and I mean, even, we don't really talk a lot about it on God's Property Radio, but with the whole transhumanism, conversation, Canary Cry always is covering that. And it does seem to be, a very an upcoming thing where gender will be disputed at some point, where it doesn't matter what gender, there probably will not be a gender at some point, right?
Well, yeah. And the reason behind that, Sam, is that they're trying to mitigate the danger, and the danger is good, strong men of Christ who have the righteousness of Christ and fear nothing but the Lord. And so if they can mitigate masculinity, if they can attack masculinity, attack disciplined, responsible men of God, they are, in essence, mitigating their enemy, because that's who we are to them.
Well, they're trying to turn us into feminists.
Yeah. And if they
every
do,
way.
if they, yes, and honestly, I'm kind of an old-fashioned guy. I believe in old-fashioned gender roles. I think that, in general, women are not well-suited for particular jobs like being a soldier, being a fireman, being a policeman, and honestly, really, for many positions in authority and power, governor and judge and so forth, I think that in general, it can sometimes backfire when you put people that aren't prepared for that type of position in a position like that, and that's all part of the agenda. As a matter of fact, I think it was Gloria Steinem worked for the CIA. That's a fact. You can, what was that? Ms. Magazine. That's all part of the CIA. And the CIA answers to Rome. The CIA was created by Rome, by William Donovan, Knight of Malta, papal puppet, from the very beginning. From then all the way through the Dulles brothers, every step. George Tenet, Jesuit, educated at Georgetown. The CIA has always belonged to Rome. In fact, all of the Western intelligence agencies are manipulated by Rome.
Right on. So I'm just going to break something out here. I got my notebook here, my trusty notebook. If it weren't for this thing, there would be a lot of things I would forget. So, you're familiar with Leonard Ulrich, correct?
Yes.
He's kind of a buddy of mine, and I appreciate a lot of his research too. He has in his first film, he groups a lot of the, I guess, what makes up the Illuminati into like different groups, and I'm sure it probably extends farther than what he listed. But can you explain really quickly? We haven't really ever explained who are the Illuminati, and this episode is really directed to help shed more light on the whole Cat Hovind situation, in which we'll get into. But can you tell us just how, like, what is the Illuminati? Is the Illuminati still real? Because it's definitely a historical, group of people that got together. So is it a philosophy that lives on, or is it still the Illuminati, or is it just a bunch of different groups that carry on that philosophy? Can you talk a little bit about, I guess, Adam Weishaupt and that whole situation a little bit?
You bet. Great question. How far back do I go? I would like to go back to, let's go back to the cross, and when the Lord cried out to Telestai, "It is done." And the curtain that separated the Holy of Holies from the inner courtyard, the massive 60-foot curtain ripped from top to bottom. Religion was dead. The only God-breathed religion was Orthodox Judaism, and it still wasn't good enough to keep God's children. And Christ buried religion for all time and gave us all freedom through his sacrifice on the cross. We no longer needed a priesthood and constant sacrifice of innocent animals to cover our sins. We had the ultimate sacrifice. We could just go through the Son of God himself to the throne of Yahweh. And after Christ put to death all religion, 300 years later, religion sprouted up again on the cross. It was started with the terrible persecution through Rome against God's children, and it mutated once it hit Emperor Constantine. Constantine apparently had a miraculous vision at Milvan Bridge where he was told that in the sign of the cross shall he conquer. Well, conquer he did. He won the Battle of Milvan Bridge, and within a few short years after that had wiped out all of his competition and was sole emperor of Rome. From there, he made some amazing changes in Rome, stopped the persecution of Christians, and stopped infant sacrifice, greatly affected slavery, made some amazing reforms. So you just never really know exactly what Constantine's angle was. Was he a savvy politician? Did he really have a communication with Christ? No one will really know. But it was after Constantine, I want to say 10 years later, that Emperor Theodosius I took him one step further and made Christianity the state religion of the Roman Empire. Well, what happened to all the pagan priesthood that was in Rome? Many of the pagan beliefs of Rome at the time had sprang back through Greece, back through Egypt into Chaldea and Babylon. And so basically much of Roman pagan belief came from Babylonian and Chaldean paganism. Well, that created a syncretistic mix of the truth of Christianity with Chaldean paganism, in the same way that Assyria's conquering of the northern kingdom of Israel created a syncretistic mix between God's truth and Judaism and Canaanite paganism. And that's, by the way, that the capital city of the northern kingdom of Israel was Samaria, and Samaria became the embodiment of the syncretistic mix of truth and falsehood, and that's why the Samaritans were so hated and reviled by good Jews. And so that's what I absolutely believe is what we have in today's Roman Catholicism, is a syncretistic mix of Babylonian paganism with the truth of Christianity. Well, shortly after that, there was sprouting up of this new version of the Roman Empire, and I believe that this fulfills Scripture in Daniel chapters 2 and chapter 7, Revelation chapter 7. I also believe chapters 17 and 19 speak of how you have the four beasts, you have the four metals of Nebuchadnezzar's vision, and they've all been commonly understood to. Let me pull this up real here. I'll pull up my notes so that I'm not speaking without reference. Daniel 2, Daniel 7, Revelation 13, pardon me. They're all in perfect harmony. The four empires we've always known are Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And in particular, Daniel 7:7 says the fourth beast was unlike the other three. Well, how is that possible? Well, it's the fourth beast became more insidious than the first three. The first three are traditional empires. Babylon, Persia, Greece. But Rome became something much more insidious, very different. And so Rome began to pull strings from behind the scenes and use other nations' armies, which hadn't been done until then. So Rome grew in strength and unfortunately in persecution, continued to persecute the children of Christ. And by the way, that's what the Fox's Book of Martyrs comes from. All the terrible evils. You know, when people mock us as Christians, Sam, they usually bring up the Crusades and the Inquisition.
Yep.
They're not mocking Christians. They're talking about Rome and the Vatican. They're talking about Roman Catholicism.
They're talking about a political agenda that basically took over the church.
Right. Well, no. Rome was never the church. Rome was never the church. I don't even like to say church. I say ecclesia because centralized religion is the hand of Satan, as far as I'm concerned. Every time there's something really wrong going on, there's a heresy going on, it can usually be traced to centralized religion. I absolutely believe in home studies for people that really want to get close to the Lord and worship on a personal level, where you have to feed yourselves, feed each other, literally and spiritually. I absolutely prefer that. But Anyway, so there was this mix, this horrible mix of doctrines of truth with lies, and out of Roman Catholicism had some of these really terrible abuses taking place. The celibate priesthood that gave birth to horrible sexual excesses and abuse of children. You had indulgences where people were given this fabricated idea of purgatory, and they were told, hey, that person that you really love that's now dead, they're in purgatory. They're not before Christ in judgment. They're not in hell. They're not in heaven. They're in purgatory. And if you give us money, we'll pray them out of purgatory. I mean, just really evil exploitation. They were now told that the priesthood was back again, and that they had to confess their sins not to each other, but to the priesthood. And that the priest will then absolve them from their sins, which is in complete abrogation of the Scripture. But they didn't know that because Rome took the Scriptures over too, translated them into Latin, and said that the great unwashed masses would not be allowed to touch the Scriptures and not be able to read it or have access to it. They would be the sole controllers, sole arbiters of God's truth. So you had people that sprang up here and there at Tyndale and Wycliffe, that tried to take a stand for righteousness and for truth, and they were beloved, but they weren't big enough to make a movement. It wasn't until 1517 when Martin Luther had his radical conversion, trying to figure out how it's possible for someone to be saved, whether they could actually work through their salvation and have a works-based salvation, or if they were saved by grace. And he had that. He was reflecting, I believe it was on Habakkuk and Romans, on how you're saved by grace, and it changed him and radically altered him. And in 1517, he nailed 95 theses of protest of these Catholic, these papal abuses on All Saints Cathedral in Wittenberg, Germany, and it was the shot heard round the world. It was the return of the freedom of the cross, of self-determination. And immediately the papacy knew that there was trouble, that and by the will of God, the hand of God, this was right about the time that the printing press had been invented. And that was the first time, the first thing, rather, that Martin Luther did, was he turned around and translated the Scriptures into his native tongue of German, started printing them out and giving them to the common people. Hey, you figure out what your doctrine should be. You understand what your relationship with the Lord should be. You read it for yourself. Absolute terrible. You hadn't seen this kind of an attack on the controllers of mankind since Christ overturned the tables in the temple. So in response to the Reformation and Martin Luther, there was a young man, my notes on this man, Ignacio Lopez, who was a Spanish knight from a Basque noble family. He was a ruffian, typical of his time. He was seriously wounded in the Battle of Pamplona in 1521. And so his dreams of martial glory were crushed. And it was after that he claims that he had a vision of the Virgin Mary and the infant Jesus. And he went to the chapel of Our Lady of Montserrat. And in 1522, this was in Manresa in Spain, and he laid down his military accoutrements before the Black Virgin, the Black Madonna in Montserrat, and vowed to follow her and to return Jerusalem to the Pope and to fight the Reformation. And so he became Ignatius of Loyola. And this, by the way, that the monastery in Montserrat was a Benedictine monastery. And it's important to know that Mary was the catalyst of this. And this twisting of the Mother of God, Miriam, into Mary, the co-mediatrix, is nothing more than Babylonian paganism that goes back through Egyptian Isis all the way back to Semiramis, the wife of Nimrod. It's a twisting of the virgin birth distraction from Christ. You see Christ as an infant. He's not an adult for you to have a living relationship with. He's just an infant, or he's a disembodied heart, or whatever odd ideas that can disconnect you from that personal saving relationship. And so this was the impetus of this movement. He gathered together some peers and some friends in Paris, France, shortly after that, and in 1534 he launched his company, became the Company of Loyola, and eventually renamed it the Society of Jesus. Blasphemy renamed it the Society of Jesus, and a few short years after that was given sanction by the Pope. And so ever since then, this group of monks have been insidious in their doings. They take a blood-curdling oath of loyalty to their superior general, and there's good reason that that's a military position. It's a military order. At one point, Loyola spent time in a cave just the same way that supposedly Muhammad did, flagellating himself and focusing on prayer and barely eating, barely drinking. And this fanatical dedication, which we should have as Christians, unfortunately was misdirected for Satan. And so ever since then, the Jesuit order has grown in insurgency, and they reached out all over the world and sent missionaries in every country. And in every country, they caused problems. They tried to undermine the authorities there and turn them back first to the Jesuit order and superior general, and then eventually to the Pope. They answered to the superior general. And they have no problem with breaking their loyalty to the Pope, even though they swear that they would obey him as a corpse does without any will of their own. And so as a result of their insurgency, they have been thrown out of every single country they've been in. And here's the sick part. Every time they get thrown out of a country, they put that country in their black book. Whether it's Germany, Russia, China, even the Catholic nations, Sam, Portugal, Spain, France, they were beseeching the Pope. They said, hey, these guys are undermining us, and we're for you. We're a Catholic nation. We obey your commands. And they're still trying to undermine us and kill us off and poison us and subvert our government. Do something, please. And so it was, I believe it was, let me get my Clement. I get my Clements and my Piuses mixed up. Clement the 13th, who was getting ready to disband the order, and suddenly he died. He was murdered by the Jesuits. He was assassinated. And so Clement the 14th took his place, and he enacted a papal bull and did disband the Jesuits. He himself was also poisoned. He was given such a terrible poison that he began to decompose while he was still alive. And that's how the Jesuits play. So that was 1773. In the perfect amount of time that the fledgling America needed to have hands off from the Jesuit order. So I really believe that America, despite all of our Freemasonic influence, really was founded with a divine commission. So this was 1773, and as a result of the disbanding of the Jesuit order, the Jesuits needed to go underground, which they did, and they took over. Some say they had Freemasonry from the very beginning, but they took over Freemasonry at that point in an effort to continue to work undercover. And in particular, it was really James the II of England who had been overthrown by the Great Civil War there and thrown out. He was a Catholic king, and so he decided to utilize Freemasonry as a means of undermining the new Protestant government there in England. And so he went to France. Let me get my notes on this real quick. Let's see. It was Clermont. He went to the Jesuit College of Clermont, where he put together with the Jesuits at least the first 25 the first 25 tenets of the first 25 grades, of Freemasonry, the first 25 degrees of Freemasonry, and really from there, many believe that the Jesuits have always controlled the Freemasons since then. So, let me see. Also, I want to throw out that Helena Blavatsky, who was a well-known Luciferian, believed very firmly that the Jesuits controlled Freemasonry. I quote her in my book, in her book, Isis Unveiled. She quotes Charles Sothran, a corresponding secretary of the New York Liberal Club, and he says, it is curious to note that the most of the bodies which work these, such as the ancient and accepted Scottish Rite, the Rite of Avignon, the Order of the Temple, Fessler's Rite, the Grand Council of the Emperors in East and West, Grand Council of the Emperors of the East and West, the Sovereign Prince Masons, etc., etc., are nearly all the offspring of the sons of Ignatius Loyola. So they were working behind the scenes with these secret societies, and it was after they were disbanded that they needed to take it up a notch. So they had this young man. Oh, and in order, before I start talking about Adam Weishaupt, why did they pick Adam Weishaupt? In order to explain that, we need to go back to October 13th, 1307. You know what happened then? Unlucky Friday, Black Friday. You still there, bud?
Yeah, I'm here.
The Templars had gotten rich off of the Crusades.
Sure.
They had created what was now modern banking, modern Western banking, particularly with the use of usury. Mm-hmm. And they had become extremely powerful. So as a result, there was an opportunity for, I believe it was Philip of France, to exploit their abuses. And he levied some accusations against them that they had practiced in black magic, that they were Satan worshippers. And honestly, some people say, well, that was never true. That was just fabricated as an excuse. Honestly, from what I've seen, it's entirely possible, if not probable. So the Templars were crushed by both France and the Vatican at that time. And let's see if I can... It was... de Molay, de Molay was their leader at the time, and Jacques de Molay, he was captured, tortured, and executed. And so, with the suppression of the Templars on Unlucky Friday, and we do things we have no idea that we're being controlled by Luciferians. Even our culture is being given to us by the Luciferians. That they realize that never again can they allow their faces to be shown on what they do, their machinations, particularly on the banking and the finance. So they needed patsies. And from that day on, and after they went underground, the Templars and the Jesuits picked up where the Templars left off. Okay. They would never again allow their faces to be shown in what they were doing. And so their preferred patsies were Jews. And ever since then, they have been picking up Jews, unfortunately willing Jews, who have become the face of evil for the Vatican, for what I call the Whore of Babylon. I absolutely believe that she's the Whore of Babylon. And so Adam Weishaupt was a converted Jew. He was a Catholic, but he was born a Jew in Bavaria. He started his Jesuit education at the tender age of 7 years old. He stayed with the Jesuits and eventually went on to teach canon law at Jesuit Ingolstadt University.
That's very interesting. Even on the whole, canon law thing, like that, with the whole, Kent and the whole sovereignty, no social security number. I know that canon law has its ties to a lot of what we're under right now.
Absolutely. You don't get to teach, and I personally believe that Weishaupt was secretly ordained a Jesuit priest. You don't get to teach that canon law are the precepts by which Rome conducts political government. Rome is in itself, the Vatican is a sovereign city-state. It's its own entity, just like London,
And
just
Washington,
like Washington, D.C.
Yep.
You bet. And so Weishaupt was an expert in the teachings of Roman law. So he is the founder of the so-called Illuminati and founded them on the pagan demonic holiday of May 1st in 1776. So anybody that says that they're an expert on the Illuminati, who mentions the word Illuminati and never mentions the Jesuit connection, I'm convinced is either willingly works for the papal machine or is just criminally ignorant of what they're talking about. A lot of people like to throw that name out there just as an ooh phrase, something that's hot to catch attention. But for the most part, they either don't know what they're talking about or are willingly keeping it a secret. I personally believe that today the so-called Illuminati is really nothing more than a boogeyman or ghost. It's not really as important. What is important is that the Jesuits are controlling and they're using their secret societies as a mechanism of control. There may even be an existent so-called Illuminati. It's an offshoot of Freemasonry. It was an elite offshoot of Freemasonry at the time. And so really the bottom line is it's a secret society. Just like the Knights of Malta, the Knights of Columbus, they're Catholic. The Knights of the Equestrian Order, that's Catholic. The bottom line is the Jesuits are the top, and the Jesuits use the Freemasons as plausible deniability. They allow themselves to have separation from the real evil that takes place. And whenever you look it up, you see Freemasonry influence. That's how they keep the powers in line. And so that's a long, roundabout way of answering your question, what is the Illuminati? The Illuminati, created by the Jesuits, and is really more of, I think, of a boogeyman than anything else. It's all we really need to know is that the Jesuits rule the world through their foot soldiers, the Freemasons, and the Illuminati. If they exist, they're an offshoot of the Freemasons.
Okay. This is kind of a side tangent, but do you know, I've never really asked anybody about this, but do you know anything about the Priory de Sion?
No, not extensively. I know that there's been a lot of effort to create this idea that so-called Zionists are really behind the New World Order, and that secret pacts to create Israel are behind all of our problems. Again, that's just part of what we talked about earlier with the masking of the machinations of the Vatican, of the Jesuits, by hiding behind the Jews. And there's no doubt about it, however, that modern Israel is run by the Freemasons, by the Luciferians, just like every modern Western nation and most really nations around the world, period. But they absolutely do not lead the New World Order. They do not lead the Luciferians. When you see people here's the key. When you get into a discussion online and you see people posting stuff about how it's the Jews, it's the Zionists, they're always irrational. They're always emotion-driven. They're driven by prejudice and hatred. And that's exactly what the Jesuits want. That's exactly what the Luciferians want. They want to cloud the issue. That's not what I do. That's not what you do. That's not what we do here. We give names, places, and dates. We give facts. We give logic and reasoning. And then these people come in, and most of them are shills and trolls, and they try to muddy the waters and confuse people and stir people with emotion. And you always can tell what they're doing when they come out with this bold-faced prejudice. And it's unfortunate that they have so many opportunities, because you have families like the Rothschilds, you have the George Soroses and so forth, that are willing participants. They're willing to be used by the Vatican, by Rome, as puppets because they got theirs. Unfortunately, in the process, they're being used as examples of how Jews and Zionists are behind the New World Order when they're not. The Encyclopedia Judaica says that the Rothschilds are nothing more than the accountants of the Vatican.
Mm-hmm. In your book, do you cover, I guess, the transition to a one-world religion? Do you talk about that?
Yeah, I do get into it. Ecumenicalism, we just had a recent gathering of supposed Pentecostals led by false teacher Kenneth Copeland, and they had direct communication. Let me get my details on here. Direct communication with the Pope through his emissary, Anglican Bishop Tony Palmer. So you had Kenneth Copeland with this message. As a matter of fact, this was a meeting of not just Pentecostals, but Pentecostal leaders. And so they were treated to a message from both the Pope and Tony Palmer. Tony Palmer apparently took this on his personal little phone camera there, this meeting of this message from the two Pentecostal leaders. And the gist of Palmer's message was, the protest is over. The protest is over. We're all one big, happy, ecumenical family. In fact, it was... Let me pull up some details on this. Pope meets with... Oh, really? Let me pull up real quick. Let's see, who did he meet with? He recently met with... Oh, here it is. Yitzhak Rabin, of all the people. Pope Francis, the new Jesuit Pope, the mere fact that the current Pope is a Jesuit and the previous Pope was given an offer he couldn't refuse and forced to step down should shock people. Should absolutely shock people. So here he has this meeting with, not Rabin, it was Shimon Peres. And so Peres, this is Peres' idea, that the Pope set up an alternative to the United Nations to combat religious conflict around the world. So you have this former Israeli prime minister ask Pope, really? No, he wasn't put up to this at all. No, trust me. To work this ecumenical effort. He also had a meeting with the Orthodox primate. I'm absolutely convinced that the Orthodox Church is the second leg in Nebuchadnezzar's vision in Daniel chapter 2. So he also, oh my goodness, Fatima. Fatima was absolutely created by the Catholic Church as a bridge to Islam. And there are some fascinating facts and hints and clues that might say that actually Islam was, if not created by, certainly helped by the Vatican, by Rome, in order to try and win back Jerusalem. It backfired. Islam kind of grew into this unwieldy beast, and as a result, the Crusades occurred, but Rome has taken Islam back over again, mainly through the secret societies, Muslim Brotherhood, definitely Freemasonic, controlled by Freemasons, all throughout the Middle East. The Freemasons run all the strictest Wahhabist sects. So the ecumenical movement really is being set up by the current Jesuit Pope, and I think the stage is set, brother, for that one world religion.
Do you know much about like the World Council of Churches, National Council of Churches, World Parliament of Religions? Do you talk about that in your book at all?
Yeah, World Council of Churches, geez, that's another big push. I want to say I saw Rick Warren's name connected to the World Council of Churches. Is that correct? Warren is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations.
Yes, I know that.
I verified that myself. He also is very big on Pope Francis. So, the ecumenical movement through these supposed political organizations is really not just political. It's very religious. And I want to say that another man that has been behind this movement, pushing it along, is former British Prime Minister Tony Blair. Do you remember what happened to Tony Blair after he stepped down? He converted to Roman Catholicism. He waited until after he stepped down, of course, because then it was safe to let people know who his real masters were. And God love him, the late Ian Paisley, fiery Irish Protestant preacher, told him he was an idiot, and I absolutely agree with him.
Yeah. After hearing your testimony and now hearing, you lay out the history of, the Illuminati and the Vatican connection and all of this, I listen to some podcasts that aren't, like faith-based, and I like, for instance, I'm a musician, so I listen to a few music podcasts, and I've found, not just in listening to that, but just in general, that a lot of people that I know, it seems like their story is like similar to yours, like where they were in the Catholic Church, or they were in a Catholic school growing up, and they've just basically become completely like all roads. You know what I mean? It's just it transfers very easily to all roads. It's not a personal relationship with the Lord, I every time I listen to this certain podcast, and I won't name the name of the individual, but it seems like every time he gets a guest on, oh yeah, you went to Catholic school too? Oh, and then they just rip on Catholicism and all like beliefs in any type of, savior or anything, And I don't know if you could speak to that at all, as your past as far as growing up with the Catholic faith.
Yeah, Roman Catholicism places so many chains on the adherent that it's almost impossible to get through the mess of dead people, of Mary, of angels, of ritual, to that living, saving relationship with Jesus Christ. And it's clearly by design, by Luciferian design. And it's interesting, it's a good point that you mentioned, is how easily Catholicism can metastasize or change or morph, and to bring in local pagan beliefs. There's offshoots of necromancy and Catholicism, of voodoo and Catholicism. There was a recent anger in, I believe it was the Philippines. I'm pretty sure I mentioned it in my book, how a Catholic priest, might even have been a Jesuit, was using Allah to say the name of God. There was outrage in China, and how the Jesuit missionaries there were incorporating Confucianism with Christianity. So it really is easy, and Blavatsky says this, that the Jesuits are into the black arts and black magic, and so they are true Luciferians. That they created the idea of light and knowledge coming from the enemy and from Lucifer, the light bearer, and gave that incorporated it into Freemasonry and turned darkness into light and light into darkness. That Lucifer is poor Prometheus, the victimized hero of mankind, that all he wanted to do was give us fire so that we could help ourselves. This is the same thing that's found in the book of Enoch, that the Watchers fell. All they wanted to do was give us knowledge, and all the knowledge they gave us was evil. It was harmful to us. As
right.
Paul says, that knowledge makes arrogant and love edifies.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and they also raped people and ate people, but that was just on the side. They wanted to help us.
Right.
So
I was gonna go somewhere and I just lost my train because you cracked me up.
Sure. Well, let's not forget Kent. You guys were the ones that put me on to the Jesuit connection for Kent, and
really,
when it was Ernie, you interviewed Ernie, and he had the information on Peter J. Riley, the Forbes accountant who was doing the columns for Forbes magazine on Kent. And Ernie found out that Peter J. Riley was admitted to being a former Jesuit. So that immediately shocked and perked my ears up. And I looked up Peter J. Riley and found out that he went to Xavier. He went to Jesuit high school and Jesuit university.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking, what is this guy, a former Jesuit, trained? Why is he writing for Forbes magazine about Kent? And that's when I really started to dig. When you guys uncovered that, and we had this same female judge, and I hate to say this brings us back to our original topic of how easy it was for women in leadership positions to go down the bad path, who had abused Kent so horribly in the first trial, and then surprised after almost 10 years, she was the one selected to be his judge again, set right back up again. And then Riley wrote this column about how Pensacola had no interest in the Kent Hovind trial, and that to me convinced me that the Jesuits were testing the waters of popular support. And that's why when we had this conversation last night, and you said that you were convinced that, well, not you were convinced, but that Ernie had said that there was a mysterious, powerful figure in the background pulling strings for us. I said, you know what? I'm not even going to consider that. I'm not going to account for that. Oh, by the way, I have the details. It was Jesuit Xavier High School and Jesuit Holy Cross College that former Jesuit Peter J. Riley went to. And this is on his LinkedIn profile, Peter J. Riley, CPA. So it's the popular support. Why do they require secret societies? They've always required secret societies. Why? Because they fear us. That's why they want us sick, dumbed down, disarmed, disenfranchised, poor, and dead. That's what they do with their machinations, and that's why they use secret societies to do all those things, to work the gun control, to put the fluoride in the water, to spray the chemtrails over our heads, because if they did it outright, we'd rise up and we'd burn them at the stake the way they used to burn us. And
right.
That's what they know is coming if they're ever found out, and that's why they have to use secret societies. And what was Kent doing, bro? You guys had posted one of his 101 classes where he just got really into the details about what government was, what taxation was. I was floored. I mean, in fact, I remember, if you remember me posting this on Facebook, where I said, this is the reason. His teaching was so good on this that clearly he was targeted and he was a political prisoner. And we have people out there saying, well, he's just a shill. Look, you see that picture, honestly, the hair on my arms raise up when I think about this. You see that picture of Kent, the modern picture where his hair is cropped short, and you just see it, you read it in his face, man. That guy has been humbled. That guy's been broken, but you know what? He's ready to go back to work. Mm-hmm. He's ready to come back. He's whatever it was that the Lord put on him to bear is, I believe, has made him even more powerful than he was. And so they have tested the waters. And they didn't think that they had anything to worry about. And then you guys kept pushing. We all kept pushing, and I think that made the difference. And now, God willing, Kent is on his way out, but we still got to work for Paul, though.
Yep. I agree with you. A lot of people want to say that it was because he was calling out evolution. And, there's a lot of people calling out evolution. I don't think that that's the main reason that Kent Hovind was targeted. I think it had a lot to do with the way he was living. I think it had a lot to do with the way he ran his ministry. And I think the fact that he did that for 30-plus years says a lot. That he was never stopped, he was never jailed, and any time that he got brought into court, I mean, if you've listened to, for the people listening, you can go back and check out Ernie Land's first interview on the Coin Toss series, where he talks about how Kent would sometimes get things in the mail, and they'd go to court, and he'd be out of there, within 5 minutes. He knew what he was doing, they all knew what they were doing, and so the fact that he could live like that, I think says a lot, and I think that they needed to make an example out of Kent Hovind and ruin his reputation. And I'm still praying. It's not that don't think that Kent will possibly get out. It's just that I guess it's one of those believe it when you see it type of things. I hate to say that. I think he is a truly dangerous man because he speaks truth, and he speaks it very boldly, and he talks about things that people don't really want to hear about because they need to hear about it, and we're so, just like you said, bread and circuses, we're just so distracted. And he's doing it in a way where a fourth grader could understand him, and that is even more dangerous.
That's exactly right, Sam. He was empowering people. All of the topics that he covered were empowering people, from taxes to government to law to evolution. This guy ever gets wind of flat earth theory, he's going to be Superman. I personally believe that is the final part of the matrix that needs to come down, is our globe earth heliocentric cosmology that has been completely fabricated. And once again, if you trace back the source, when this changed, for thousands of years, good, civilized, God-fearing people believed that we were in a large plane that was fabricated for us. It was created for us. It was only until the Vatican changed things with their mathematicians, their own puppets, Copernicus and Kepler, to reorder our world for us, to say that it was a cosmic accident, created the Big Bang, created by Jesuit Georges Lemaitre, through evolution, that the Jesuits, if they weren't behind it, they absolutely have superpowered it. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin was behind both the Piltdown and Peking Man hoaxes, the idea that these fabrications were actually the missing link that they so desperately needed. They were altering our worldview. They were hiding the hand of God because it makes humanity easier to enslave. So the heliocentric globe earth cosmology, evolution, freedom from government, these are the chains that are thrown on to recreate the feudalism that the American experiment destroyed. Nowhere else on the planet have we had such success with the creation of a middle class. That's why the middle class is almost non-existent anymore, because the Counter-Reformation has been beating down the middle class ever since. The cross was the beginning. The Reformation was the acorn. And the Bill of Rights, the Constitution, was the oak tree. The creation of the middle class, a strong, self-determinate, God-fearing people built on the Protestant work ethic, people who could own land and defend it with a gun. Nowhere else on the planet has there been the success and prosperity as it has in this experiment, and now that's why it's almost gone. It's because it's been under constant attack by these Luciferian forces to finish us off and enslave us, from the attacks against manufacturing, the free trade. If people are so stupid, Sam, how can you have such consistency from administration to administration? The Democrats are supposedly all about labor, all about the unions, and yet they walk in lockstep with the reptilicans. I call them demon rats and reptilicans. They walk in lockstep for this free trade stuff that they hamper us with year after year after year. They appeal to the most terrible communist slave labor in China and the East and Philippines, where people work for pennies, in India, and these Luciferians on Wall Street exploit it. They suck the jobs out of the country. They put good Americans out of work, and both parties walk in lockstep, just the same way that both parties have walked in lockstep towards war. And that's all war is a way for the Luciferians to make money, to destroy the useless eaters, to throw us into the meat grinder, and to punish the enemies of Rome.
You know, I was going to ask you, because of your background, with the service, how did that, when you came to your realization with all this, how did you feel about all the wars and everything? I mean, you must be really passionate about this.
I'll tell you, everyone should at some point spend some time in a third world country, and if they can, it should be a war zone. it will change. It will change how you think. The infrastructure in Iraq, and I'm sure Afghanistan to this very day, is still not rebuilt where it should have been. As we look back and do the digging in history, we see that it was the Luciferians that created the tensions in the Middle East in the first place. They created the nations of Iraq and Iran. They fabricated their excuse to go into Iraq. They themselves, the papal traitors, George J. Tenet, Jesuit-educated CIA director at 9/11, was the key man who murdered 3,000 Americans on 9/11 through all of his puppets, his skull and bones puppets, the Bush Nazi crime family, Dick Cheney. If you want to really have your blood run cold, read what former CIA sex slave Kathy O'Brien wrote about being a mind control sex slave, and the things she said about Dick Cheney. He's a reptilian if there ever was one. They created the true Hegelian dialectic. They murdered our own people, our politicians, traitor politicians, by the direction of Rome, conducted the PSYOP of 9/11, where 3 buildings in New York City collapsed into their own footprint as the supposed result of being hit by only 2 planes. They had their own man, Rudy G. I'm getting so upset I can't even say his name right. Giuliani, in there to see it done. This is the same guy who made sure that when these Satanists were abusing little kids at West Point, they loved to prey on the military and on the minorities. When they were abusing little kids at West Point with their satanic rituals and sex abuse, that Rudy Giuliani was the federal prosecutor to make sure that it wasn't followed up on. I do some research on Michael Aquino, supposed Army officer and Satanist.
PSYOP and mind control, I believe, right?
Yeah, you bet.
Yeah.
You bet. And so they're all involved, and you look and see how the CIA was behind LSD. The CIA was giving LSD to innocent Americans, to innocent service members, to test it out for the purposes of mind control. And you stop. Ask yourself, how can our own intelligence agency be so malignant? How can they be so evil? They are our worst enemy. They're far worse than any other enemy we could possibly have. It's because they're controlled by an organization, by an entity that hates us. They're controlled by Rome. Anybody that touches on this and say, oh, well, the CIA killed Kennedy. Oh, well, what, are you kidding me? They slaughtered a sitting president, Alan Dulles, Catholic Alan Dulles, and as the director of the CIA at the time, Catholic John Foster Dulles was Secretary of State. His son Avery Dulles is a Jesuit priest, was a Jesuit priest, became a Jesuit cardinal. They all answered directly to Rome. They slaughtered a sitting president in broad daylight as a lesson to anyone who would rock the boat. Even though Kennedy was a Catholic, he was going to do the right thing across the board. He was going to splinter the CIA in 1,000 pieces, scatter it to the 4 winds. He was going to urge Congress to create silver certificates and to take back our finances from the central bank, the foreign central bank, the Federal Reserve. He was going to win against communism. This idea that the CIA, it's okay for the CIA to have slaughtered Kennedy because he was behind the betrayal at the Cuban, the Operation 40 of the Bay of Pigs, the invasion. No, he actually wanted to win communism. He wanted to either pull out of Vietnam or win. He either wanted to beat down the Soviets or get to a point where we weren't at odds with them. And that's not what they wanted. How is it possible the CIA had the ability to slaughter a sitting president in broad daylight, and yet they haven't been able to touch Castro after all these years? That's because Castro was one of the Jesuits. It was a Jesuit puppet, Jesuit educator. He was in like 3 different Jesuit institutions in his lifetime. It was all put there for us. It's this constant back and forth. of a meat grinder of war, hot war, cold war, created by this malignancy in Rome to eat us up, to eat up our finances. How in the name of heaven could we have a 10-year war in Vietnam and have our hands so tied that we couldn't win? It was proven in 1991. How do you win a war? You put tanks on the front door of the guy that's in charge of the country. They couldn't figure that out in Vietnam. They knew exactly what it was. It was the papal puppets that were purposely dropping good American boys into that meat grinder. And to answer your question, that's exactly what's going on in the Middle East today. And it's all about human trafficking and drug trafficking and these Luciferians that are in charge of kidnapping little boys off the streets and feeding them to politicians, or taking over the opium trade in Vietnam and Cambodia or in Afghanistan, where poppy production has risen 300%. You know what happened to Pat Tillman? He figured it out. They walked up to him and they shot him with a 3-round burst in the face. And I've got the AP Associated Press coroner's report on that. You can look that up for yourself. Shot in the face with a 3-round burst of .556. That's what happens. And that traitor, that high traitor, Knight of Malta, Crystal, the supposed special forces tough guy, he was behind that high treason. He helped cover it up. And they all answered to the same source. Oliver North. Hey, when I first got into the idea of the so-called Iran-Contra, it sounded like a great idea. You'll sell guns to Iraq and Iran and make sure they'll keep fighting, and you'll turn them over to the Contras so they can fight the Sandinistas. Yeah, down with communism. Wait a minute. The whole thing is a setup. And what's worse is that North was getting into the drugs. He was helping to facilitate the drugs through Mena, Arkansas, and he was also into the Rex 87, the martial law contingency plans for when they take final and total control. He's another high trader, and that's why he's on Rupert Knight of Malta, Order of St. Gregory, I Like 'em Blonde, Murdoch's faux news. That was his pasture land to go to. You know, I used to look up to him as a fellow and former Marine. He's a high trader. Anybody that brings drugs in, everyone in the CIA that's involved with that, to bring drugs in and put it on the streets of American cities to destabilize our own country. How is it that they're so malignant? It's because they answer to another organization. The FBI, again and again and again, we see these major incidents, these false flags. TWA 800, Oklahoma City. Again and again, that FBI goes in and doesn't try to find who did it. They obfuscate the evidence. They try to cover the tracks. Are you kidding me? You're supposed to be solving crimes, not making it easy for the people to escape. The FBI, created by Rome, Charles Bonaparte, a relative of Napoleon Bonaparte, Catholic Charles Bonaparte. The NSA, where's the NSA based in? It's based in the Catholic colony of Maryland. Lord Calvert.
You know, that's interesting you brought that up too, because of the whole, you know, the 10-mile square, you know, squared off Washington D.C. is. I think it was David Flynn who kind of tipped me off to this, where I was watching one of his presentations and he said, well, I mean, look at you got Virginia and Maryland. You have the Virgin Mary right there.
There it is, brother. It's the Catholic influence. They call Washington, D.C. Little Rome. If you know the layout, let me pull my notes up. If you know the layout of Washington, D.C. and Rome, you have the... first of all, Washington, D.C. is considered one of the most Freemasonic cities anywhere in the world. The way it's laid out, the streets and the landmarks are just clearly Masonic. Washington, D.C. was designed by who? Pierre Charles L'Enfant. Oh, and by the way, the idea that the Freemasons and Rome are at odds, they're mortal enemies, pure psyop, brother. 100% psyop. It's created there so that they can have plausible deniability. There are several prominent Catholics who were Freemasons. Pierre Charles L'Enfant was one of them, the Catholic Freemason who was a member of Holland Lodge No. 8 in New York City, who completely designed Washington, demonically controlled that whole city there. And what do we have across from the mall? You have this giant obelisk that's called the Washington Monument. What? And you look at that thing and you say, what does that have to do with George Washington? It doesn't look like George Washington to me. It looks like something we shouldn't be thinking about. Well, what is that? That goes all the way back to Nimrod and to Chaldean Babylonian paganism. And the way that the idea, the myth, the legend goes is that Nimrod was executed for his treachery in trying to lead humanity astray. He was executed by Noah's son Shem, who went on to be the progenitor of the Hebrew people, which is one of the reasons why the Luciferians hate the Jews so much. He was executed and chopped into many pieces. Some say 12, some say more than 12, and scattered across waters somewhere as a lesson to any future Luciferians. And so the legend goes that his wife Semiramis put his pieces back together and managed to impregnate herself with his, his private parts. Either she created private parts or uses private parts. Some say the fish god Dagon brought her the private parts, and she was able to impregnate herself with her husband. It was actually their son Tammuz, who actually was Nimrod reincarnated. So you have this really weird, twisted. It's basically them trying to take our Christ, our Messiah, and twist it for their Luciferian gain. We know who Christ is. We know what he did in his first advent and how his miraculous birth was so important to us. So they mirrored this even before the incarnation, Christ's first incarnation. They had this out as legend, as myth. And so this is where the Luciferians started, particularly with their virgin and child worship. So these obelisks are the body part of Nimrod, and this also mutated into this carried over into Egypt, and the names changed to Osiris and Isis and Horus as the chosen messianic son, and so. The obelisk is the phallus of Osiris, and across from the obelisk is a large rotunda, which is supposed to mimic the womb of Isis. This is exactly what they have in the Vatican, and it's exactly what they have in Washington, D.C. Spin image. And if you want, I'll go ahead and give you another example of a prominent Catholic who's also a Freemason. A guy by the name of John Wilkes Booth.
Yeah.
Was a Catholic and a Freemason. A Knight of the Golden Circle, Albert Pike. Albert Pike, the only Confederate to have his statue in Washington, D.C., as a mockery to America, who really controls America. And, by the way, John Wilkes Booth was not the lone gunman who murdered our sitting president. It was a Catholic Jesuit conspiracy. And the tip of the spear for this conspiracy was the Surratt family. This is something you'll never get from the history books, but it's easy to find for yourself. Mary Surratt was the matron of the family, and her son John Surratt, studying to be a priest, was the co-conspirator. So after they murder Abraham Lincoln, Surratt fled the country and was helped by priests, disguised as a priest, ended up going through Rome, was captured in Egypt, sent back to the United States. Oh, and surprise, it was a mistrial. John Surratt lived to a ripe old age. I also have evidence in my book that John Wilkes Booth was never executed.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely heard that. I definitely have heard people talk about that, about John Wilkes Booth as well.
I have a source from an eyewitness that said he saw him and he watched Albert Pike draw back in fear as Albert Pike recognized him. And the sources are in my book.
Yeah, a lot of people say that. I mean, a lot of people say that about Hitler too. I mean, I don't know. I don't have any sort of documentation on any of that kind of stuff like you do. But so you're mentioning all these connections, right? And one thing that I think it was Ernie again. Going back to our first coin toss that we did with Ernie Land, he was just kind of pointing out like the connections in our government. Between all of the key politicians out there and just being part of the Bar Association and lawyers. And I thought it was really interesting. And do you know, I I'm curious right now. Do you know anything about like Colin Powell or his background at all?
Just a little bit. I just want to tell you that anybody that gets, as a former service member, anybody that gets above the rank of major, or I would say E6, E7 staff sergeant, or sergeant first class, gunnery sergeant, they're all going to be brought into the machine. They're all going to do their bidding of the machine. They're going to commit treason against their subordinates and break their oath. It's absolutely guaranteed at this point in time. Those few that rise up to honor their subordinates and honor their oath to the Constitution are quickly weeded out. They're beat down. So anybody that gets to that level is absolutely a traitor. They're going to do exactly what they're told. And as far as judges in the Bar Association goes, again, they're just nothing more than the plausible deniability. They're part of the mechanism. They're the fingers of the hand, and the arm leads to Rome.
Right.
And I had some examples of that. You have, for instance, now you can't control all 535 members of Congress, but you can control the key positions. So let's go back a few years to the previous Speaker of the House, one Nancy Pelosi. Nancy Pelosi, Italian Catholic, hard left, hardcore communist, pro-abortion, pro-homosexuality, pro-gun confiscation.
The same one who wanted to pass, what was it? Was it Obamacare? And she wanted to pass it before anybody read it.
Well,
right?
Yeah. I mean, it was 2,000 pages. Just pass it, and then you could find out what's in it. You don't want to read all that.
Right.
Well, interesting that when she became Speaker of the House, the person that gave the convocation was her mentor. Her mentor is Stephen J. Privet of the Society of Jesus.
Really?
She installed, oh yeah, you can look that one up, Stephen J. Privet, P-R-I-V-E-T-T, Society of Jesus. He is the president of San Francisco University. Oh, San Francisco University sounds pretty secular, doesn't it? Nope, Jesuit institution. She installed the first Catholic priest. No, by the way, the results of the investigation into Abraham Lincoln's murder so clearly showed that the Catholic Church was behind it. And by the way, Reverend Charles Chinnicky, who was the personal confidant of Abraham Lincoln, stated that Lincoln believed not only he would be murdered by Jesuits, but that the Jesuits were behind the entire Civil War. And when the investigation was concluded after Lincoln's murder, it was so clear that it was a Vatican plot that the United States severed diplomatic relations with the Vatican and brought our ambassador to Vatican City home. And the relations remained severed until the administration of Ronald Wilson Reagan, high papal traitor.
Huh.
Back to Nancy Pelosi. She installed the first Catholic priest, Daniel P. Coughlin, as House chaplain. John Adams and Thomas Jefferson are rolling over in their graves. Why are they rolling over their graves? Because they wrote to each other about how the Jesuits had been reinstituted, and I forgot to flesh it out about what happened. Napoleon, whenever these Luciferians create some kind of a madman to rule the world or to do their evil bidding for them, they always go and get an outsider. Napoleon wasn't French. He was from Corsica. He was raised by the Jesuits in Corsica. Stalin was raised by the Jesuits. He was a Jesuit priest in Tiflis, and the Orthodox University, supposed Orthodox seminary in Tiflis, was controlled by the Jesuits. Hitler wasn't German. He was Austrian. And we got this guy in office right now. Nobody knows where he is. Maybe he's Kenyan. Maybe he was born in Hawaii. Nobody knows where he's from. He was an outsider. He was created by the Jesuits, by the Catholics. I have so much information on Obama and how he was the Catholics who ran his upbringing in communist, his black communist ideals in Chicago. But so many different information, so many tracks to go down. But so Napoleon was raised up, and this is easy to find out. Catholic, a Jesuit-educated Catholic priest, Abbey Joseph, I think was the first name, Sieyes, S-I-E-Y-E-S. He may also have been a Jesuit priest ordained in secret. Abbey Sieyes was the one who was Napoleon's confidant, whispering in his ear to help persecute the Protestants of France, the Huguenots, They were so beat down and wiped out, Sam, that they were not existent at the end of the Napoleonic Wars. The Huguenots were completely decimated, wiped out, never again to come back. So the Jesuits aimed Napoleon at the Pope, and he captured and imprisoned Pius VI. Pius VI died in prison. A few weeks later, they, through a cardinal conclave, ordained Pius VII as Pope. Pius VII was then also captured and imprisoned by Napoleon, and surprise, surprise, he got the hint and reinstituted the Jesuit order. So that was done in 1814. A few years later, I believe it was 1823 or 26, there were letters between two best friends, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams, back and forth about how they dreaded the reinstituting of the Jesuits. Unfortunately, these were men who had many of their ideals from the Enlightenment, so they had this ridiculous idea, this Jesuit idea of universalism, of suffrage, of all beliefs, when in reality, America, to succeed, needed to be founded and raised on Protestant Christianity. So their idea was, well, okay, yes, the Jesuits are coming back, and they are the spawn of Satan. You should read what Adams wrote about them, that they are, no organization merits hell greater than the Company of Loyola. I mean, really, really strong words. And yet, they were committed to their Enlightenment ideals of allowing anything to occur, allowing these missionaries to come, allowing them to teach whatever they want to arrive in disguises, which they do. So much of Jesuit work is done undercover. They take the black cassocks off. They're regular teachers. Outside of the actual Jesuit institutions, the Jesuits teach everywhere. Some of them you know the Jesuits, many times you don't. And so Adams and Jefferson had this correspondence, and that made them go down in the Jesuit Black Book. And so they died together on July 4th in 1826, within 4 hours of each other. And if anybody thinks that that's a coincidence, they need to wake up and smell the coffee. It's not a coincidence. It wasn't some divine hand of karma. It was the Jesuit calling card, because they are experts at assassination. And so they had to give you their little calling card by murdering our presidents on July 4th, which is there to mock us. Oh, but by the way, this year, July 4th, falls on the 17th of Tammuz. The 17th of Tammuz is a traditional date that Nimrod was executed. So I'm kind of excited to see, maybe something will happen in the background, maybe a snowball will start rolling, or maybe something big will happen on July 4th. We'll see.
Huh. Wow. So, okay, you've done a really good job at showing us, the prevalence of the Jesuits and their connections in today. Oh,
wait, no, I haven't. Wait, there's more. Oh my goodness. Hang on. Pause. I started with Nancy Pelosi and wanted to lead into the next speaker, right? Who is the next speaker? John Boehner, and I'll stop after that. John Boehner was educated at Marianist Moeller High School and Jesuit Xavier College. Boehner installed the first Jesuit house chaplain, Patrick J. Conroy. So earlier you mentioned about people, when you talk to people, prominent people, and you said, oh, they went to Catholic school. When you look at these people in positions of authority, particularly, you see this guy, Barack Obama, who supposedly everybody's upset because he spent a year in a madrasa. Well, when he was in Indonesia. No, he was in Indonesia for 5 years. He spent 1 year in a madrasa. He spent the rest of that time, the other 4 years, in a Catholic school. Since then, he has instituted so many Catholics, so many Jesuit-educated individuals, it is sickening. You look at people, you ask, what is their religion? Where were they educated? Who are their family members? Where were they educated? What were their religion? For instance, our new Secretary of Defense, Ashton Carter. Now, he was installed by this supposed communist Muslim, Barack Obama. He replaced Chucky Hagel. Chuck Hagel, the Secretary of Defense, was educated at, Ashton Carter was educated at St. John's, Oxford, the Counter-Reformation College. Chucky Hagel, Episcopalian. Oh, he's not Catholic. Well, Episcopalian is kind of like Catholic light. Hagel apparently was Catholic enough to teach at Jesuit Georgetown. Georgetown is the focal point of their control of Washington, D.C. Hagel took over for Leon Panetta. I call him Leon Panchetta. Panetta shocked everyone because Obama resurrected him from a Clinton graveyard. He was Clinton. He was a nobody, a congressman from California, and then he became the chair of the Office of Management and Budget. He eventually became Clinton's chief of staff. And then he was resurrected by Obama to become not just the Secretary of Defense, but he also served time as the director of the CIA. Are you kidding me? What made this man qualified for those incredibly important positions? He was educated at Santa Clara, the Jesuit College of the Silicon Valley. And now we have our latest chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, another high trader of the Marine Corps, Joseph Dunford. Joseph Dunford, educated at Jesuit Georgetown. All you got to do is you pick some of these people, and immediately the radar goes off. I have this clip I like to play from my podcast from the Chronicles of Riddick. Look, all Hollywood movies are Luciferian. The vast majority of them you really shouldn't be watching, but if you're a well-grounded Christian adult, sometimes you get some great insight. The Luciferians love to tell you what they're doing in their movies. So there's this scene in the Chronicles of Riddick where he's on this prison planet, and the prison planet is controlled by Russians. Don't ask, it's science fiction. And these Russians, the guy in charge has this lieutenant, this henchman. His name is Anatoly, and Anatoly can sniff out trouble. So that's why I say Anatoly's nose. You use Anatoly's nose because it can sniff out trouble. You can sniff out the Jesuits. You get this feel for these key positions of power and authority. You got the European Union. Both Barroso and Van Rompuy and the European Union, the top two men in the European Union, Jesuit educated. Wow. Everywhere you look, their hand is there, but you have to know, you have to look to see where they were. Oh, let's talk about the current CIA director, right? John Brennan, Jesuit University of New York, Fordham. This is the guy that supposedly covered up Obama's tracks by getting rid of his passport. He also supposedly went on the Hajj, too, and spent time in Saudi Arabia to make sure that they can fully handle anybody that doesn't understand that the CIA, Rome, through the CIA, created both Al-Qaeda and so-called ISIS. I mean, come on, really? The Islamic State of Iraq and Syria? Could you have tried any harder to show you're pagan Luciferian? The Muslims don't even know who ISIS is. They think they care about that? And that's why I had to muddy the waters and rename it IS or ISIL. Because it was too obvious, they realized, oh, geez, we kind of showed our hands with that. And that's all you see on CNN and Faux News. Oh, ISIS is coming to get you. They created ISIS. Are you kidding me? You have a better chance of being shot by a cop than you do a CIA-created terrorist. Mm-hmm. And that's what something else to bring it back to what you asked me about my time in Iraq. I came home, and I had good Americans. This is the best time in the world and the worst time in the world to be a service member in the United States military. It's the worst time in the world because you serve evil traitors who throw you into meat grinders. It's the best time in the world because Americans now more than ever will shower you with love and appreciation. And I would be in an airport, and good people would say, "Hey, man, thanks for protecting our safety. Buy me lunch, buy me donuts." They just fall all over themselves, shake my hand. It was just so humbling. And then they turn around and they hold their hands up like they're a prisoner of war and walk through a naked body scanner and let some ape in a blue uniform sexually grope their little girl, little boy. And I'm thinking, wait a minute. What freedom did I grant you by my service in Iraq? You're worse off now than you ever were. Oh, and by the way, the guy who wrote the Patriot Act, Viet D. Din, Catholic law professor at Jesuit Georgetown University.
Mm-hmm. You keep bringing up Georgetown University, and the first time, I remember, really, it was years ago. I'm not that, I haven't been awake for long. I mean, it's been a few years now, but I was also, riding the right wing, train for a while there, and I remember the whole Sandra Fluke thing. I don't know if you remember that whole thing in the news about Sandra Fluke from Georgetown University.
The Georgetown law student. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? They would pick somebody like that to just kind of hit that up, especially
she got a personal audience with Nancy Pelosi herself. Now, how does a common law student that no one's ever heard of, how does she get on all the major news media outlets and get to speak to the Speaker of the House? Boy, that's pretty big clout. unless you factor in the Jesuits.
Yep. And I know that you brought this up, and I know this is also in Leonard Ulrich's first film, but the Clinton connection. I know that wasn't it Bill Clinton himself? Did he not study under Carroll Quigley?
Carroll Quigley of Tragedy and
Hope. Yeah.
The man who wrote this voluminous tome about the New World Order, how it operates, how the financial sectors are actually all connected, how there's an elite that is managing things. And Bill Clinton studied under Carroll Quigley. Where did he study? At Jesuit Georgetown University.
Mm-hmm.
I also bring up, and speaking of Bill Clinton, some of the people I really like to listen to now, and I mentioned Eric John Phelps, who actually is my neighbor, lives 20 minutes away from me in Pennsylvania. I reached out to him and never heard back, but he's got some odd ideas, but for the most part, he is phenomenal on names, places, and dates. So we don't take anybody in without testing the spirits. That's what good Christians, we're all good Bereans. So we test the spirits, and he does say some things that are questionable in regards to race, but for the most part, he is phenomenal on the history. Anytime he throws something out, I stop, I pause, I look it up, and boom, I find a reference for it. So I really enjoy him. I also enjoy some teachers in the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Now, Seventh-day Adventists, I do not consider them a cult. I do consider them a little wayward. They were created by William Miller and also the teachings of Ellen G. White. So there are some Freemasonic influences there. These messianic figures, Victor Huset, I believe, was the Seventh-day Adventist that created the Branch Davidians. I think he was Bulgarian. And so outside of their fixation on messianic figures, they just have this legalistic, also a fixation on the importance of the Sabbath. But here's the point. They are dead on. They're just about the only sect in Christianity that hammers the Jesuits and Rome. And they are absolutely right when they mention in, I think it's Daniel 2:7, how the spirit of the Antichrist, the beast, the Antichrist, will change the times and the seasons. Well, that's exactly what the Jesuits have done. Christopher Clavius changed the calendar, the Julian calendar, which was also a Roman calendar, reordered it for the Jesuits, for Rome, to make it realign with pagan holidays so that our Passover became Easter. Mm-hmm. They also reordered the Sabbath from Saturday to Sunday. So the Seventh-day Adventists are actually right on that. But I do think that they get to a legalistic extreme. We know from reading Colossians that everything was made for Christ and through Christ. And all of our traditions, even if the traditions are based in Scripture, are nothing more than a shadow. And Christ is the substance and the light. So I am careful not to get legalistic, and I'm far from becoming a Seventh-day Adventist myself. However, there's a couple of Seventh-day Adventist teachers that are very good, and particularly in regards to Rome and the New World Order and being awake. Professor Paul Veith is one, Doug Batchelor is another, Bill Hughes is another. So I like these guys as resources for myself. But I know I'm brought that up because I am convinced that there's no coincidence the Jesuits used their puppet Bill Clinton to target the Branch Davidians, because the Branch Davidians were an offshoot of Seventh-day Adventist sect, which is the only Protestant sect that consistently hammers the Vatican and the Jesuits. And as a result, almost 90 men, women, and children were slaughtered on trumped-up charges of gun violations, ATF gun violations. And it was Jesuit raised Georgetown. Jesuit Georgetown raised Bill Clinton. Oh, and by the way, what brought Bill Clinton to power? A mountain of cocaine brought in by the CIA and transferred from the Bush Nazi crime family to the Clintons, back to the Bush Nazi crime family. All in through Mena Arkansas. By the way, I highly recommend the book Compromised by Terry Kent Reed, CIA operative and pilot who was actually doing the flying in of these. Actually, he was flying in Contras, but he was part of the mission that brought the cocaine into Mena, Arkansas.
Huh. Well, okay. I have a question, and I'm sorry I don't want to, if you're on a roll, I don't want to stop you. But
No, do it.
Okay, so can you tell me a little bit about the Knights of Columbus?
Oh, goodness. Only in as much as they are another secret society. And here's what the degrees give you. The degrees in secret societies give you trust in dedication to Lucifer. As you rise through the degrees, you prove that you're willing to do things that are more and more evil. By the way, Jeb Bush, our supposed next presidential candidate, he's a Knight of Columbus. These degrees that you go through in these secret societies prove to their masters over years and years of dedicated service to Satan that you are trustworthy. So that by the time you reach the high degrees in any secret society, you've shown or you've committed an atrocity and shown that you're dedicated. You have to follow through. The trafficking of little boys is done by the CIA through these secret societies for the Vatican, for Rome. The Franklin cover-up started in Boys Town in Omaha, Nebraska. The great Boys Town from the Hollywood movie of Boys Town. It's the good Catholic priest that just wants to help the young ruffian boys get. No, what they're doing is they're kidnapping these boys, they're sexually abusing them, they're inflicting them with torture and trauma-based mind control, and then they're feeding them to despicable politicians and world leaders for their blackmail and their control. And that's all part of it. Oh, by the way, the entire Bush family is mentioned prominently as not only in imbibing in Terry Kent Reid's book Compromised, not only in trafficking cocaine, but also using it heavily. And we already knew that Bush Jr. How do we continue to have people of the same family in office over? Why didn't we go to war? Didn't we have a revolution to destroy the ruling elite? And that's what we have overnight. And we're possibly facing a Bush-Clinton runoff in the next presidential election. How stupid are we? The Catholic Dodd family, Senator Dodd of Connecticut, who patterned the 1968 Gun Control Act after the 1938 Nazi Gun Control Act and got it passed because the Jesuits slaughtered Kennedy. You couldn't get it passed before Kennedy. Got the 68 Gun Control Act passed after Kennedy. His little son, Chris Dodd, came in and took over for him and spent some 45 years as a congressman. So they just passed the baton back and forth, family member to family member. We now have a ruling elite. Oh, by the way, Dodd, who was behind the real estate, the banking scandal, the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, that debacle that cost billions of dollars, and all those papal puppets saying, well, we got to bail them out. Even Sarah Palin, the great conservative spokeswoman, Alan West, they're all, we got to bail them out. The big bank bailout. No, really? No. That was just a robbery, a further bleeding of the American public. And all Chris Dodd, where is he? He's in Hollywood, taking care of the Jesuits there. How well the Jesuits entrenched in Hollywood? Well, let me ask you. Whenever a young kid wants to go and fight the machine, he wants to go and protest on the street, but he doesn't want to be found out, what does he put on? He puts on a Guy Fawkes mask.
Right.
He puts on a Guy Fawkes mask. What is that from? Well, that's from that movie. Was that V for Vendetta and a Guy Fawkes? Remember the 5th of November. What happened on the 5th of November in 1605? Who was Guy Fawkes? Guy Fawkes was a Jesuit assassin. He was attempting to blow up Parliament. He had the basement of the House of Lords covered in barrels of gunpowder to murder Protestant James I, to take over England, take back England for the papacy. They found him out before he could conduct his treasonous plot. They stopped the plot and executed him. And so ever since then, on the 5th of November, it has been celebrated with Mass of Guy Fawkes and burning the Pope in effigy. And then it's been so buried and reversed in time that now we put on a Guy Fawkes mask to protest against the machine, and it's the machine that laughs its way to the Jesuit bank.
You know, I think it was a couple months ago or a few months ago during this whole Free Kent campaign, somebody who was part of like one of those support groups on Facebook posted a picture of Kent Hovind with a Guy Fawkes mask on.
And I don't fault them for it. They don't know.
Right.
They're saying, hey, Kent's against the machine. Kent is against the machine. He is part of the resistance. But the resistance is co-opted when you see Guy Fawkes, the V for Vendetta. It's the same the Wachowskis who did The Matrix. They were on the inside. You know how much on the inside they were? The brother-brother team, they're now brother-sister team. Yeah, Larry.
That's right. That's right.
Larry Wachowski was rewarded for telling us about the how the New World Order works by having a gender reassignment, the way Bruce Jenner did. So Larry Wachowski is now Lana Wachowski. That's
really interesting because, okay, just coming from the music perspective of things for a second here, I remember back in, I think it was 2011, maybe it was 2012, I can't remember, but the singer of this band called Against Me, he became a woman as well. And that was the first I'd ever heard of this stuff, and then by the time you get to now, it's almost become pretty normal. Almost, I hate to say it, but it's becoming pretty normal to have gender dysphoria or whatever.
It brings us full circle, Sam. It's an attack against masculinity. It's attack against the disciplined men of Christ that scare the poop out of the Luciferians who run the world, and so. At the very pinnacle, they use trauma-based mind control to really warp someone and to get them to voluntarily do a gender reassignment. But in a broad sense, it's constant propaganda. You constantly attack the male figure. When was the last time you saw a good, disciplined, responsible Christian male figure as the hero anywhere? In any movie, in any TV show? Nowhere. The Luciferians own it all. And the closest we can get is every once in a while they'll allow a little bit to come out. Sometimes just trick us into going in one direction, or just to give us a little false hope, or just to show their hand a little bit. The Marvel comic movies, I really enjoy them because I grew up in comics as a kid, but they're thoroughly Luciferian, absolutely completely Luciferian. But it's fun if you're grounded in Christ. You can see the agenda. Some of it is propaganda. Some of it is tipping their hand. And I was surprised that they have the whole the transhumanism thing with Captain America, the super soldier, and yet every once in a while you can have a fun moment where you're watching in the Avengers movie, and Thor comes in and he takes Loki from the plane. And
Loki.
Captain America, Captain America goes and is about to jump out the back of the plane, and Black Widow says, "Hey, you better let this go. These guys are just about gods." And his line is something like, "There's only one God, and he doesn't dress like that," or something like that. It was a great line, but that's all we get. That's the closest we can get to being thrilled by our conservative old school ideals, and that's all we're going to get because they own Hollywood, and that's how they do their propaganda.
Well, I was going to say, and so okay, like with the entertainment thing, I grew up playing music in the Chicago area, okay, and this is back in like 2001 to 2011 pretty much, and I was there for like the whole, I don't know if you ever heard of the band Fall Out Boy, but they're a pretty popular band. They kind of had their heyday, and then they came back after a 3-year hiatus, and when I was coming into my, like, I guess, awareness, of the New World Order and all this stuff, that's when they came out with this new album called Save Rock and Roll, and you just saw their agenda in all their music videos. I mean, it was so openly Luciferian. If you watch, they did a video for every song on this album called Save Rock and Roll, called the Youngblood Chronicles. And it's really interesting. Like the last video, for instance, has Elton John in it. He's like a guest singer on the song, but he's also in the music video. And in the music video, he plays God. And it's just so interesting to watch. But see, I was not good friends with Fall Out Boy. I was friends with friends of Fall Out Boy because I was playing shows around the area and everything. And I was just going to point this out in context with everything. We always used to play this place called the Knights of Columbus. Very popular place for bands to go play shows. And I even remember Fall Out Boy filmed their first music video at the Knights of Columbus, which almost makes me wonder if that was supposed to be some sort of like, hidden in plain sight thing. Like, oh, there's a flash of the Knights of Columbus and we're playing on this stage, the Knights of Columbus. I don't know. That's a speculatory thing. But the bass player from Fall Out Boy, I just wanted to throw this out there and just read this to you, because as you talked about, the movies, I kind of want to just point out the music situation here. If I just read this to you, I think that at least, probably not at all surprising, but it says that Wentz was born Peter Louis Kingston Wentz III in Wilmette, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago, Illinois. He is the son of Dale Lewis, a high school admissions counselor, and Pete Wentz II, an attorney. He's of English and German descent on his father's side and Afro-Jamaican on his mother's. He has a younger sister, Hillary, and a brother, Andrew. And then it says his black maternal grandfather, Arthur Winston Lewis, served as the U.S. ambassador to Sierra Leone. Arthur Winston Lewis's cousin is General Colin Powell. And then it talks about his parents meeting while campaigning for now Vice President Joe Biden back in the 1970s. And then it also says that I know Pete Wentz was a very popular soccer player at a private school, and then he went to study political science at DePaul University. So I think that can kind of even tie in with some of the things that you said as well.
Oh, Catholic Joe Biden, who got his degree from Jesuit Scranton University in my Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He's the real power behind Barack Obama. If you put together the Vatican, the Jesuits, and then all of their secret society puppets, anybody involved in a secret society or who bows to Rome, you've got everybody that rules the world, bro. You've got everybody that rules the world. And they love to go back to your example of Elton John playing God. They love to mock us. They love to rub our face in it. And honestly, I think the Luciferians, they have part of it is just pure evil joy to do it, and the other part of it is they're daring us to do the right thing, and we don't. No one has the courage to step up. They bought into this universalist ecumenical stupidity of all religion is the same, and the only good society is a secular society. There's a passage that I continue to quote from the apocryphal book of Jubilees that talks about how after the flood, and we in these circles have heard the theory, and I agree with this theory, that the purpose for the flood was to stop a genetic runaway of hybridization between fallen angels and man, so that it couldn't poison the messianic line. And you had these aberrations all over the planet, these hybrid, these Nephilim, and that was the true reason for the flood, to preserve mankind. It talks about Noah, and what was Noah's qualification? Noah's qualification was that he was a good man who walked with God, and he was, and this is one of the few rare occasions I will quote the King James, I cannot stand the King James, he was perfect in his generations. That meant, that word perfect was tamim. It was the same Hebrew word used to speak of the physical perfection of the sacrificial lamb. So his genealogy was not tempered by these aberrations, these genetic aberrations. So that was the real reason behind the flood, I'm convinced. After the flood, Jubilees tells us that the sons of Noah had seen these fallen angels come back and continue their shenanigans. And so they complained to Noah and asked Noah to beseech the Lord to pull these fallen angels and their aberration hybrid offspring out. And the Lord said, yes, oh wait, I'll do it. I'll wipe them out. And then it says that the watcher Mastema, who some believe was Lucifer himself, was the enemy himself, beseeched the Lord, begged the Lord to stay his hand, and said that the evil of mankind is great, and the total number who have been need to be led astray have not been reached. And it says the Lord acquiesced and allowed 10% to be spared. So I believe that when these Luciferians conduct this insane evil, now listen, if we really believe that Yahweh is sovereign, we have to accept that every single thing that happens is part of his plan. It's not part of his will. His will is for all to be saved, for none to suffer. But part of his plan is everything that goes on. And he allows evil because evil tests us. Our greatest calling, I am convinced, is not to, Christians say, well, we're here. Why are we here? Well, we're here to worship the Lord. No. We're here to be conformed to the image of Jesus Christ. Romans 8:29. We are conformed to his image in pain and trial. The reason why we're supposed to conform to his image is because Yahweh is the great matchmaker, and he wants a bride for his son that is as much like his son as we can possibly be, because you don't want a whiny, selfish, immature bride. You want a bride tested and challenged and passionate about her dedication. So that's why I'm convinced that evil is allowed to exist.
Yeah, no, I mean, a lot of people say things like, I think a lot of the people that in our own brothers and sisters in Christ that will not even look 1 second at your book or any of the things that we've said here. I would just say again, this is something that I heard from Leonard Ulrich, and I would just quote this. I mean, it's in your Bible, but essentially, if heaven itself wasn't exempt from a conspiracy on behalf of Lucifer and 1/3 of all the angels, then what makes you think that today is any different?
Absolutely. And it's not people get full of themselves and say, well, I bind the devil and it's the devil's work. Well, wait a minute. You got to understand, the devil is in the council. He stands before the Lord amongst the council. Yes.
Right.
He petitions the Lord for what he does. He petitioned the Lord to challenge, to send evil to Job.
Yes.
That is the degree. There's this movie called Snowpiercer, and it is awful. It is one of the stupidest movies I've ever seen. And yet, if you are awake and you watch that movie just for the metaphors, oh my goodness. So you have this train that is running around the world after the apocalypse, and the world is covered in snow. And by the way, someday we have to have another talk about the flat Earth.
Absolutely, I'd love to hear more about that. I haven't gone down. I just haven't had a lot of time, but I know that Gons and Basil have talked about it with somebody, and I know that a lot of people are talking about it. Rob Skeeb is really into it right now, and I'd like to hear about it, but I have to choose my battles right now.
Sure. and so this comes out. I believe it comes out in a metaphor in this movie Snowpiercer. They got that kid Chris Evans, who I like as Captain America. I think he's done a decent job. I think that those movies, I really expected, if nothing else, on a conservative, I call him conservatard, what I used to be level. I thought they were really going to ruin the Captain America character because he just embodies America. But it's still watchable. It's palatable. And so I think they picked this kid for a reason. to play the lead in this movie. You have this train that's running around the snow-covered world. And why is that important? That's because the poles, particularly the South Pole, is not what you think it is. There was as soon as man began to have the technology to investigate for himself, it was locked down, especially the South Pole. Look up Antarctic Treaty of 1959. When people began to have the resources to go investigate for themselves what the Earth actually was and what was particularly on the poles, then you had supposed enemies from all over the world, France, America, Britain, China, and Russia, all banding together to lock down the poles. Now, why is that? The same reason that you see if you watch supposed alternative Russian media, that you have all this brand new Cold War that's going on, and it is really a Cold War that's been reignited, particularly in Ukraine. I mean, bloody things going on, and yet everything is daffodils and lollipops at the International Space Station. Well, why is that? Is there a reason that transcends the Cold War? Is there some broad psyop that's being promoted across the two countries? Could it be that our cosmology is not what it is? I will tell you that as you investigate the Flat Earth theory, and you understand that, number one, behind our heliocentric cosmology is the Vatican and the Jesuits again, and number two, that in the Flat Earth model, the Bible is much more accurate, and the hand of God is much more obvious. So that is the reason why the metaphor of the snow in this silly movie, Snowpiercer, because the snow of Antarctica tells you the truth of what the world really is. So you have this stupid train that's going around the world, and you have the poor people, us, in the back of the train, and they're eating blocks of just crap. They're eating this weird thing. They're beat down. They get their children kidnapped and mind controlled. And there's an uprising. And the leader of the uprising, I believe, is a metaphor for both Christ and Yahweh. And you have this uprising that goes through the train. I'm not going to ruin the whole movie, but you know what? It's already ruined because it's a stupid movie. And he gets this uprising, goes to the front of the train, and Ed Harris, such a place got a great Satan, who really is a metaphor for Satan. The front of the train were these mind-controlled children, in the same way that they have stolen so many kids and sexually abused them in the slave trade, mind-controlled them. He lets out this shocker that he's been in touch with the old John Hurt guy who's leading the rebellion. They know what's been going on the whole time.
Right.
In the same way that there's a metaphor. Now, here's the crazy part about this stupid movie Snowpiercer. The metaphors are skewed. The metaphors are not accurate. So it's like it tells you, but it only tells you what they want it to be. For instance, they actually the train stops and it blows up and it careens off to the side, and then the movie ends, and it's a stupid ending because you're like, oh my goodness, you're worse off now than you ever were before. But that's what they want you to think. They want you to think that if you rock the boat, if you ask, if you question, if you derail the train, then bad things will happen. So even the metaphors were skewed. But that's not what we believe. We know what the truth is, and we're going to keep pushing for it.
Right on. Well, I just thought it was funny, as I was mentioning Pete Wentz and DePaul University. Isn't it kind of funny that their athletic team is known as the Blue Demons for a Catholic team?
Brother, it's not a coincidence. It's spot on. The pagan demonic influence is there again and again. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's covert. I just put up or found reposted somebody's picture of John Paul II sitting in a chair where there's an upside down cross inscribed on the chair. And so there's this big dialogue back and forth in social networking about how, this is the cross of Peter. Well, no, it's the upside down satanic cross. Well, which is it? Can you claim the cross of Peter? Well, no, you can't claim the cross of Peter because 1 Timothy 2:5 says we have one advocate through Christ Jesus. There is no such thing as the vicar of Christ on earth. And so again and again we see this, even the inside Catholic sources will tell you that there are some really evil things going on in the Catholic Church. And good Catholics can at least look at their leadership and start asking some very, very serious questions. So supposed former Jesuit Father Malachi Martin, great source of information, but again, I don't believe that he ever really left the Jesuit order, wrote of how the smoke of Satan is rising up from the Vatican. He was a personal friend of Paul VI. He went to his grave. He fell down some stairs. People said, well, the Jesuits killed him. Honestly, I believe that he was actually left. No one voluntarily leaves the Jesuits unless there's an agenda behind it. There are a few people. There's a guy by the name of Alberto Rivera, who I believe was a legitimate ex-Jesuit who became a born-again Christian, who was a great source of information that was much more accurate than some of the stuff you get from Malachi Martin. That you should read some of the stuff from Tom Horn too about how there's a recent taking over of the Vatican of Rome and the Jesuits by satanic forces. No. This was always the beast of Revelation. This was always the fourth and final beast, unlike that of any other. For generations, we have known, the Protestants have known, that the Catholic Church was the whore of Babylon. In fact, all of our modern eschatology comes from Jesuits. The modern eschatology comes from Jesuits. Praetorism and futurism are both Jesuit-derived. Praetorism and futurism both come from Jesuits. The idea of the pre-tribulation rapture comes from the Jesuits. John Nelson Darby, Cyrus Scofield in his Scofield Bible. It was in 1767. The Jesuit priest Manuel de la Cunza y Diaz came to Italy from Spain. And he went undercover, because you can't do this on the surface where people know what you're up to. He wrote undercover as a supposed Jew named Rabbi Juan Jehoshaphat ben Ezra. He was a Jesuit. And under this alias, he wrote this book, The Coming of Messiah and Glory and Majesty. And Lacunza was the first to theorize that the church would be taken up before the Lord to escape the reign of the Antichrist, which was just a short 3.5-year reign and some 45 days before Jesus' return from earth. So Lacunza fed this to Margaret MacDonald. Margaret MacDonald gave this to John Nelson Darby. John Nelson Darby gave this to Scofield. And now, if you even think about questioning the pre-tribulation rapture, people who are supposedly leading the church will do crazy, evil things to bring you down. And in reality, all you have to do is read the Word of God. Matthew 24, Christ tells you in red and white, first comes the tribulation, then comes the gathering. The futurism. Futurism was created by Francisco Ribera, a Jesuit. The idea that the Antichrist will appear suddenly and out of the blue, and no one will see him coming, when in reality, the Jesuits were rewriting our eschatology because we knew that the final beast, the whore of Babylon, was Rome. And so they fed this, and it's been completely and totally successful. How many Protestants today believe, as Martin Luther did, as anyone who read Fox's Book of Martyrs? Dude, have you read what they did in the Inquisition? And by the way, the Inquisition lasts to this very day. You and I are paying for it with our tax dollars. Eric Prince of Blackwater is nothing more than a papal crusader. Our military does the crusades for the Pope. Have you read the evil things that they did to our brothers and sisters in Christ? They tie their arms, they lift them by their arms backwards so their arms ripped out of their sockets. They forced them to sit on beds of nails. They pulled their toenails out. Evil. You can't think of the things they did. Why? Because you loved Christ. This was the papal authority. The Spanish Inquisition, it was Rome that did this. Fox's Book of Martyrs is filled with it. And it hasn't ended to this very day. ISIS, as fabricated as it is cutting a swath through the Middle East. Who are they murdering, torturing, raping, and killing? Christians in the Middle East. Everywhere the United States military has gone, Christians suffer. There's not a single Christian church in Afghanistan. Now, that's what my blood and sacrifice of our soldiers, of my sacrifice has gotten. Christians, everywhere the United States military has gone, Christians now suffer. A tree is known by its fruit, and it's despicable.
Yeah. So, okay. I would like to, number one, I'd like to just kind of go back into Kent real quick, if that's all right.
Sure.
Kind of wrap things up and then, give a little plug for your sites and your book and everything. But I was recently told by Ernie Land, text today, because I talked to you yesterday, and I was telling you some of the things that Ernie was telling me about Kent, basically somebody, helping him out who is a diplomat, right? And so he was basically trying to get him diplomatic immunity, but I guess the State Department put a stop to the diplomatic immunity for him. This is in a text from today. And Kent was thrown back in solitary confinement yesterday. So just thought I'd let you know the latest update. But
I thought it was being processed out. How is all this going on?
Yeah, I don't know, but they say that he will still be released on July 8th. So that's the recent text that I got from Ernie. I know that Paul Hansen is still awaiting sentencing and is still facing those charges that the same charges that were dropped against Kent. So we still need to keep Paul Hansen in our prayers. Yeah, so I guess if there's anything else you want to say in regard to Kent and what we can be doing for Kent, go ahead, and then I'd like to plug your book a little bit after that.
You bet, absolutely. Here's what the Luciferians fear. They fear us. They fear you. They fear me. They fear the Christians who are listening to this program and think that they're nobody. But you are somebody. All it takes is Gideon's 300. All you need is the righteousness of Jesus Christ, the passion of Christ, and the power of the Holy Spirit, and the anger to step up, stand up, and start doing and saying and talking and blogging and writing and speaking. That's who they fear. Honestly, I want more information, but my first gut reaction is that Ernie Land is being fed something. I don't believe in this, especially when we hear that this mysterious, foreign, powerful, wealthy person doesn't even have enough pull to help ease Kent's final few weeks in jail. So how really powerful is this guy? What I've seen is that people around the world in power are owned by the Luciferians. What they really fear is an awake, angry, righteously angry populace of good Christians. And so the way to continue to help Kent and especially Paul, we're not stopping until we get all our political prisoners released from these Jesuit scum that control and manipulate this disgusting legal shenanigans. What is the language of medicine and law? It's Latin, right? It's Latin.
Right.
Why? Why is it Latin? It's Latin as part of this machination to control and obfuscate, so that the common man has no idea. You have to rely on a doctor. You have to heal yourself. You have to rely on a lawyer to get yourself out of trouble with the state. And that's why Kent and Paul were targeted, because they were empowering people. I'm telling you, I'm praying. I hope there's an opportunity somehow I get to also turn more people on to our cosmology and the lie of the heliocentric globe Earth. Because if Kent gets onto this flat Earth thing and he starts going into that, all these different things, the law, evolution, the Big Bang, this lie of the accident of who you are, and you find out just how accurate the Word of God is and just how much each and every human being walks with a divine spark, and you're walking in a biodome that was created for you to mature into the bride of Christ. It's overwhelming. They are terrified. They're racing to the end because they can't let all this information out. And we are racing them to the end. And oh, by the way, I read the end of the book and we win.
Right on. Well, can we get a little plug? Like, what's your book called? Illuminati Unmasked?
Sure,
I believe
sure.
it is?
Illuminati Unmasked. It's a massive 826, almost 900 pages, 2,000 citations in the book, because it's important to me as a member of alternative media not to just give an opinion, but to give a well-cited, well-resourced opinion, and it runs from Nimrod to Napoleon to Kennedy to the ancient Egyptian pharaohs, all through. And if you believe my buddy Freeman Fly, then it gets to Barack Obama and back to the pharaohs again. Whether or not he's got some clone pharaoh DNA, I don't know. It's up to you. But it's a great theory. And so 900 pages, 2,000 citations. You can get it on Amazon. You can go on my website, johnnycirucci.com, JohnnyCirucci.com. I was down for a little bit because I was hitting the Sandy Hook thing pretty hard, and one of the Sandy Hook government puppets, was attacking my site and my YouTube. But we're back up again. I have a podcast called Resistance Rising. I will say that I continue to be a little rough around the edges. Look, I'm a passionate guy. I'm an Italian. I'm a soldier, Marine. So I use kind of like construction worker language, and I bleep it out. So just fair warning, I don't do it gratuitously, and I have never. I think there's been 3 times since January 14th, 1994, when I was saved, that I have accidentally I haven't come close to allowing the name of the Lord to come out of me in vain, and that was just by mixing words up. I've never since then consciously taken the Lord's name in vain.
Right.
Just get passionate, let little things bleep out, so I bleep and edit it out. But Resistance Rising is on Blog Talk Radio. So
I really appreciate that you mentioned that about your language, because that's something that I struggle with, and I don't think a lot of the Christian truther community talks about our language, and like, for instance, like Dan, my co-host, who's not here right now, Dan has his own struggles, and those are not things that I deal with, but he doesn't deal with the language thing. And that is a really tough one for me, because I also always had a very sailor-like slur to my vocabulary, and I've definitely got it more under control, but there are times when it just it's very hard to control, and I appreciate that you at least pointed it out, because I think a lot of us struggle with that.
Brother, here's my concern. My concern is someone that says they don't struggle with anything. We are real. What makes us different is that we, as honest, dedicated, responsible Christians, look ourselves in the mirror. What makes us different is that we examine ourselves and we say, you know what? I swear too much. You know what? I look at girls too much. Much more insidious than bad language is pornography, and how too many Christian men, you have this internet that can provide you with anything your heart desires, and it's worse than a drug. Worse than a drug. It's nothing less than the hand of Christ that can help you slow it down. And I don't know of any man that doesn't struggle with something. What that does is it gets us in touch with our mortality, and it forces us to either confront ourselves or live a lie. And so good Christians look in the mirror, and we confront ourselves. And I'm afraid we're kind of rare. It's Christians who are sincere, who will openly say, you know what, I struggle with that. That's what sets us apart. No one is without sin. Only Christ was without sin. And so we look ourselves in the mirror and we say, you know what? I swore too much yesterday. I fell. I went on the internet and I looked at stuff I shouldn't have looked at. And I did things I shouldn't have done as a result of that. But I admit it. It's wrong. Lord Jesus, forgive me. Help me. Give me strength to not do it again. And that's what makes us different. Not that we're without sin. And let me tell you something. What I have done, I am surprised at the number of people who write. I get a lot of great responses, people encouraging me. And then I have Christians who write me in regards to the language thing. And it's fascinating to see and read some of these comments. These people get so viciously indignant. And I wrote one nice lady. I said, you know what, ma'am? I do beg your forgiveness. It is a weakness of mine. And I am just so grateful. I'm so thankful that we in America have the time to fixate on the language that's a little salty coming from a blog talk radio host, when there are Christians all over the world who are being raped and murdered and beheaded. There are Christians in China who are having their baby girls ripped out their arms and murdered in front of them. There are young girls in this country who are being trapped and imprisoned in abortion clinics and forced to murder their babies against their will, being refused access to their sonogram. There are babies being ripped out of the womb in the third trimester, living babies, having a pair of scissors jammed to the backs of their necks, pure satanic evil. And yet, we want to make sure that the host doesn't say salty things. How blessed are we? I'm telling you, brother, there's an awakening coming. There's an awakening coming. And the good news is that those of us who are already there, those of us who love Christ, and I believe that they want more than anything else to set off a nuke in this country is the next level to the false flag. Dirty bomb or a nuke. They want it. It's coming. Guccifer, that Romanian hacker, has already told us that they had planned through his emails reading up Colin Powell. He mentioned Guccifer. Look up Guccifer and Colin Powell, bro. There's some good material there. And how that they were picking an unnamed city in my Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. They were picking Chicago, a couple of different places to set off a nuke. No matter how bad it gets, FEMA camps, armored cars rolling up the street. Love Christ. Dedicate yourself to Christ. Do what is in your sphere of influence to do, and He has your back. I'm a prepper, but I don't have any money, dude. I'm living hand to mouth. I'm lucky if I have 2 weeks of prep. And by the way, when I prep for everybody in my household, including my 10 pets. I got plenty of food for them. They'll eat like kings and queens, but I'll be eating ramen noodles. But I only have enough that my resources can give. I'm not manic about it. Yeah, I do own a couple of firearms, and I practice with them when I can. I don't own thousands of rounds of ammunition. I don't own months and months of food and water. I have what I can have. I leave the rest up to Christ. I am a diligent steward of everything that He has given me, and what is not in my power is in His.
Mm-hmm. And that even your power is because of Him anyway. So, amen. Well, hey, can we close out with? Can you just say a prayer real quick?
I would love to.
We'll close out with that.
Lord Jesus, we're so deeply grateful for this time together, for this fellowship, for this ministry of Sam and Dan, and what great and wonderful things they've done. We lift up all of your servants, Kent and Paul, all those around the world too, who are being beat down, who are imprisoned, who are being tortured, the horrible things that they're enduring for your name, Lord Jesus. We ask you to continue to prosper our ministries, to empower your flock, to wake the flock up, Lord Jesus, so that they would accept their responsibility as your stewards to take back what is rightfully ours, to re-empower us, to free these prisoners, to stop the torture and the murder and the killing. And Lord, we just ask that more than anything else, that the listeners here would be enriched, would be drawn closer to a passionate relationship with the King of Kings, in whose name we pray. Jesus.
Amen.
All right, welcome back, and that was an intense and fun conversation. I'm sorry that Dan couldn't have joined me. Again, Johnny, his book is called Illuminati Unmasked. You should check it out. He's been on Canary Cry Radio. He's been on View from the Bunker. He's kind of making his rounds on the fringy Christian networks that we also are fans of as well. I did mention in the episode, but just in case anybody wanted the update on Kent. I know that right now Kent is in solitary confinement, and I haven't heard anything since today. But we'll see as we go. We're not done with these coin tosses. If you know anybody that wants to come out and talk about 501c3 churches from a personal perspective of experience, then I'd love to hear more about that. And so nothing else really new going on. So check out freekent.com for all kinds of interviews and t-shirts and a compilation, godspropertymedia.bandcamp.com to download the Kent Hovind tribute compilation. And until next time, don't buy into what the world is selling.
Okay, who's doing all this and why? And what are we supposed to do about it? There are many people involved in the plans for the New World Order. We have the United Nations, we have the World Council of Churches, we have the Council of Foreign Relations. You want to get more on that? There's the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderbergers, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, the International Bankers, the Club of Rome, the Communists, the Socialists, the National Education Association, NEA, the Masonic Lodge. Most of the guys that I know in the Masonic Lodge, including some very close friends of mine, don't really have a clue what they're in. They don't realize till they get to the top it's a satanic organization. I'll show you. Here's the oath. General Pike said, "That which we must say to the crowd is, we worship a God, but it's a God that one adores without superstition. To you, sovereign grand inspectors general, we say this, that you may repeat it to the 32nd, 31st, and 30th degrees. The Masonic religion should be by all of us initiates of the higher degrees, maintained in the purity of the Luciferian doctrine, lest, yes, Lucifer is God." I think it's time to get motivated, folks. There's a real serious problem coming, looming on the horizon. We're going to see real serious trouble in America. What do we do? Well, the first mention of Caesar in the Bible is in Matthew 22:17. "Tell us, therefore, what thou thinkest. Is it lawful to give tribute unto Caesar or not?" Jesus was born under Caesar's control. What did he do? He ignored him. Just go win souls. So 12 things we need to do. Number one, you need to realize God's in control. He's the potter. We are the clay. Shut up. Sit still. Let him do something with you. Okay? Be still and know that he is God. Let him put you where he wants you and make out of you what he wants, whatever he wants to make out of you. He's the potter. Number two, be wise as serpents. I think we stick our head in a lot of nooses and let them hang us. And we could talk a long time about all the different ways that we have created a nexus of relationship with the government. Churches do that by getting 501c3. People do that by getting marriage licenses and driver's licenses and social security numbers. Number three, be careful for nothing. Careful means full of care. I see people that are worried and nervous. Wow, what's going to happen? The New World Order's coming. They're going to come kill everybody. Well, go win some souls. Number four, pray for those in authority. We're his children. Obey his orders. Preach the gospel. Be the salt of the earth. Salt irritates. Some of these Christians are so worried about offending somebody. Who cares? I want to please God. Nothing else is going to matter, folks. Use your influence. Everybody has influence. Money doesn't dictate right and wrong. If it does, you got a problem. You do what's right. God takes care of it from there.